Well, Donald Trump isn't the president anymore, and that means you haven't heard a lot about Russia recently. That is until yesterday, when Joe Biden gave an interview designed to remind us he's a very tough man.
So you know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
Putin's going to pay because he's a killer, says the guy who just sent missiles into Syria for no obvious reason. Putin responded by challenging Biden to a debate, which honestly would be worth watching. We want to hear Biden out, though. So let's take a close look at Russia's record. Very upset about Russia. What have they done? Well, they've committed genocide. They've bought up the entire third world in Africa and Latin America. They're literally building all the infrastructure in the Bahamas. In our hemisphere, they're stealing our jobs, our intellectual property. They're dumping tons of fentanyl into this country, which has killed more than 100,000 people. They filled our universities with spies. They're trying to dominate the world. Oh, but wait, that's not Russia. Russia didn't unleash a virus that destroyed our economy and left millions unemployed. China did that. China, and the dictator who runs it, Xi Jinping. Joe Biden knows this. He knows Russia isn't an existential threat to the United States, but he keeps talking about it because he doesn't want to talk about China. His family has made millions, apparently, from China. Countless others in the corporate and ruling elite have too. But it's Putin who's going to pay. And not just Putin. You know who else is going to pay? You. You're about to pay a lot more in taxes. Biden told us that as well.
Yes, anybody making more than $400,000 will see a small to a significant tax increase. If you make less than $400,000, you won't see one single penny in additional federal tax.
So what Biden didn't explain is why he wants to raise taxes. And by the way, we're not going to give you the conventional conservative take on taxes, the Grover Norquist take, which is, you could never raise them. That's not the point at all. The point is much bigger than that. The point is, why do we have taxes in the first place at this point? We don't fund the government with tax revenue. We fund it with money that the Federal Reserve creates. How do we just pay for a $2 trillion relief bill? It wasn't tax money that did that. We just printed the money. So actually, taxes are kind of beside the point at this stage. Democrats could tax all the income in the United States, and they still wouldn't balance the budget or pay off the debt. In fact, they'd be about $10 trillion short of paying off the debt. They could go after your assets like your home and your savings and retirement accounts. Maybe they'll try that. Elizabeth Warren has been trying that for a long time. But the question is, since we're not funding the government with tax revenue, we've decided that modern monetary theory is real. Like we could just print money because we're the reserve currency. Why would you even consider raising taxes on families making $400 grand? Why do that at this point? You don't need to punish you, obviously. Individual Americans paying taxes make up the largest part of U.S. tax revenue. They account for about 42% of all the taxes the government takes in. What's the smallest source of tax revenue? Oh, the donors, corporate taxes. Those account for about 3.9% of all taxes. Joe Biden knows that tax increases aren't going to hurt corporations or private equity firms. They won't touch Ivy League endowments. They'll leave the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation completely alone. No billionaire is going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And for no good reason, because to restate one more time, we don't fund the government with tax revenue. We fund the government with money the Federal Reserve makes up out of nothing. That's true. And no one says it. So coming on tonight to make some sense of this Biden interview, in order, Russia and taxes, is Victor Davis Hanson, about the wisest person we know. He joins us now. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. So first to Russia, this obsession, and this is not a defense of Putin's regime or of Russia or anything like that, but why the focus, the relentless focus on Russia?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always a bad idea, Tucker, to gratuitously call a killer the head of state with 7,000 deliverable nuclear weapons. And there's no standard. I don't know whether Putin has not killed 20 million people like his communist predecessors. He is not the Communist Party in China that has the blood of 70 million people on their hand and 1 million people in camps. We could go on with North Koreans, the Castroite regime in Cuba. So there's no standard by which you single out somebody and not the other. It reminds me, though, we're missing what Henry Kissinger told us 40 years ago, and he was realpolitik. He said, we don't want China to be a better friend to Russia than they are to each one to us, because we actually do have some common interests with Putin. We're both wary of Islamic terrorism, and we both don't want China to run the world. And we, along with the Russians and India, can check China if we don't throw away that card. So this anger comes out of the Russian collusion hoax, but even earlier, they came into power, Biden and Obama, and they said Bush was too hard on China. We're going to reset. And Putin, as the autocrat he is, he interpreted that magnanimity as weakness to be exploited. And finally, we got to the surreal situation where Obama was trading necessary missile defense so that Biden would behave during his reelection, which he didn't even do, although we gave up missile defense. So I think they're a little bit humiliated, and especially after 22 months and $40 million didn't find any Russian collusion. It was a hoax. And so it's just an obsession now. It's a religion.
Yeah, and Russia's also
As
the
far
only
as
big country in the world that doesn't buy our woke program, and I think that drives them. They won't take the pronouns, drives them insane. So I have to ask you about taxes. So we've decided that we can fund a $2 trillion relief bill just by printing the money. So clearly taxes are sort of irrelevant to run the government now. Why are they so eager to tax us?
Well, I think it's to punish people and tell their base that we're going to redistribute income. But the fact is, we're running a $2.3 trillion annual budget deficit. We're getting up to $29 trillion in aggregate debt, national debt, and the only way to get out of that is either to do what Trump tried to do, although he didn't address the spending, and that is deregulate and have tax incentives and have full employment. But when you mention, as Biden and his associates are, that they're going to raise taxes on the productive classes, they're going to have more regulations, they're going to stifle energy production, and yet they're going to borrow more money, then the only way out is zero interest rates and either inflation or stagflation or recession or all combined in the way that we saw in the 1970s that got Ronald Reagan elected. And that's where we're headed. We have no margin of error now. We can't borrow money to get out of a recession because we're in debt to an astounding degree. We can't lower interest rates because they don't really exist. We're already there. So I don't know what stimuli we have when we hit the recession. It's all been used up.
I've noticed. Why is anyone paying any taxes since they're just printing the money and burdening our kids with it? Victor Davis Hanson, I appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.